Welcome back to Stuff No One Told Us About Weight Loss. My name is Eloise and I'm here with Aaron. And today we're talking about cognitive biases.
So this is an interesting topic because a lot of change that we are dealing with when we talk about weight loss has to do with our thinking. And a lot of it stems from these biases which govern our life and how we sort of view the world and how our behaviors and beliefs are really formed. Mm-hmm. So this will be a really interesting topic. It was really interesting for us. So
it's a topic we love to talk about.
Yeah, if this stuff interests you, you're going to love today's episode.
Yeah, because basically, like, as humans, most of us like to think that we're pretty rational and we're pretty logical. But the truth is that we're actually mostly operating under these cognitive biases, which sort of govern the way that we see the world.
Yeah, so basically a cognitive bias is almost like your own personal lens of how you see the world through. So we see the world through our own beliefs, interpretations, and our own thoughts, which can be vastly different to another person.
Yeah, it's like that idea of two people can go through the same thing or experience the same external thing, but see it in a very different way based on their perceptions, based on their past experiences, based on their beliefs, based on so many different things. And those things are essentially cognitive biases. And a lot of the times we don't even necessarily know they're happening because they're so subconscious. And a lot of people aren't even aware that they're a thing.
Yeah.
We just think that, how we believe things are is how they are. But it's like, no. And it comes back to that quote of like, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are.
Yeah. It's very interesting once you start to go down this road and you realize that these things exist. It really gets you to question yourself and go like, oh, hang on a minute. Like,
yeah, where are these showing up in my life? The answer is everywhere.
So our brains are usually pretty smart at conserving energy. You know, they'll try and look for little shortcuts here and there. And sometimes the shortcuts are good. Other times they tend to work against us and they bring us to the wrong conclusions and we end up with the wrong type of result that what we anticipated.
Yeah, and that's like cognitive biases can sometimes work with us, as you just said. They can help us make decisions faster without our brain having to like actually step in and be conscious. So it's helpful in that way. But then it's not helpful when it's like our past experience or our beliefs are causing us to make these decisions that aren't necessarily serving us now or the way that we want our lives to go in the future. And so that's where those biases can hold you back. And that's why it's helpful to be aware of them so that we can then start to be conscious, noticing them, notice where they're happening, and then actually use them to our advantage or bypass them.
Yeah.
Now, when we're losing weight, these cognitive biases are also playing a role in the results that we get. And that's why it's really important, and that's why we love to talk about these so much, because they do influence your weight loss results. When we're losing weight or we're making any kind of change in our life, we're going to need to question these cognitive biases and the thought patterns that we're currently going through, because your current thought patterns are giving you your current results. So if you want new results and you want something better for yourself and you want to change your life in some way, you're going to have to become aware of, where's my brain going in these situations? Why is my brain coming to these conclusions? And is that serving me? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. I want to make a different choice for myself.
Yeah. And I think it all stems from having a bit of an open mindset, specifically for that realization of like your current thoughts are leading to the outcome that you're experiencing now. So if you are at a point where maybe you're just starting your weight loss journey, you're at that point now because of the thoughts and the decisions and beliefs, etc., that are all happening in your mind at the moment. In order to move past that, we need to maybe open our mind to the possibility of change, and that's where we can become aware of these things. Then we can make changes to them.
Yeah, exactly right. So we're going to share with you 3 different cognitive biases that we feel like are mostly relevant to weight loss, and they're things that we've experienced, they're things we've seen clients experience, and they're things that are genuinely just very common. So the first one we're going to talk about is confirmation bias.
And this is a really interesting one because it happens everywhere, not just with weight loss.
Yes.
There's a lot of different things where this plays out. And basically, confirmation bias is we're looking for information to support the belief that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So our brains get really good at finding information that supports our belief. So if we believe that it's going to be hard for me to lose weight, our brains are going to search for evidence to prove ourselves correct. So we're going to look at, every time we've failed, and we're going to keep revisiting that and playing that over and over again in our head, and we're serving that up as evidence, and it's like, well, this confirms my belief.
Exactly. And an interesting thing about confirmation bias is it also, on the other hand, involves us ignoring evidence that goes against our belief.
Yeah.
So in that instance where if you're someone who believes weight loss is hard, and that was me, that was 100% me, I would constantly find reasons why it was harder for me, and I would always notice when it was maybe easier for other people.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would never notice are the things that were easy for me.
That's
or
right.
the times when I was doing things really well. Or the times where, I was getting these small wins or making these choices for myself. I would never notice those things because it didn't support that belief of weight loss is harder for me.
That's right.
I would only find stuff that would prove that to be true.
Yeah, so another example is when anyone gets onto a new diet specifically, and you've probably noticed this, maybe you've done this yourself and you've changed your thinking since then, is that as soon as someone, let's use the diet, for example, the paleo diet, because we had some experience with this years ago. When you start going down the route of, hearing about the paleo diet, then all of a sudden you start just magically starting to see all the information that supports that. And anyone who's against the paleo diet or questions your belief and your thinking, you tend to disregard it. You put it away and you go, well, that's not the best idea. That this is the best diet ever because Paleolithic man ate all of these foods.
Yeah, and it's kind of why this is one of the reasons why a lot of diets get that sort of cult status where people start to form the diet beliefs as part of their identity. They constantly will surround themselves with people who also agree with what they're thinking about the diet. They'll constantly read things and watch things and surround themselves with all the information that they can find to confirm this belief. And it's happening subconsciously, right? Like people aren't saying, well, I'm going to go out and find all this stuff to confirm my belief. They're just naturally finding it.
Yeah.
And they're noticing it. That's the key, is the noticing. Like there will be a lot of things thrown at them, probably many reasons why that diet is not the best thing. There's people telling them that. There's probably even things they're reading.
Yeah.
But they'll find reasons why those things aren't correct and why what they believe is correct. And that's confirmation bias working over time.
The other interesting one to note is the documentaries. No doubt you've probably seen them on Netflix, out and about a specific diet. They're very heavily weighted towards a confirmation bias. So the evidence that they're serving up is taking the bits that support the overarching belief, the overarching diet, and disregarding all the bits that are
things.
Other parts of the equation that they're not addressing and that could go either way. They're sort of just leaving you with one conclusion.
And they'll bring in medical experts and science experts and have them sitting there telling you what you want to hear or telling you what supports their argument. But they won't ever bring on the medical experts or the science experts who have an opinion with valid evidence that goes against that.
Yeah.
And so that's the confirmation bias, when you're only looking at one side of the argument.
Yeah.
You're not ever considering what's the other side. When we're looking at confirmation bias, a really great way, a great step forward for us to make, if we're wanting to make changes in our lives, we're going to need to notice when we're stuck in confirmation bias, because we need to learn new things. We need to open our minds to new beliefs. And so in order to do that, we can't be stuck thinking that our current beliefs are the only way. One thing that I love to ask myself is, what else could be true? That is just a very simple question that you can start asking yourself, no matter what you're looking at, no matter what you're talking about, is just what else could be true? Not what else is definitely true, but what else could be true?
That's right. Or even, what's another interesting way of doing it is say you are very stuck with one way of believing something, is go out and try and find the evidence to support the other belief.
Try and actively prove yourself wrong. See if you can do it.
You'll be surprised at probably what you find. And once you really try to force yourself outside of confirmation bias and starting to, see things from the other side, then you're taking a neutral perspective.
And it's ultimately going to help you make a decision that's the best decision for you. Because if you're only looking at one side of the argument, you're never making a truly personal decision for yourself. It's always clouded by your confirmation bias. Whereas when you look at both sides and you weigh up both sides of an argument and then you go, okay, well, this is my opinion, that's making a true opinion. That's making a true decision because you're deciding based on proper evidence versus deciding based on beliefs or things that you already have confirmation bias around.
Yeah. And so the second one that we're going to be talking about is negative bias. So it's focusing your attention on all the negative things, the negative thoughts, anything that's from a negative aspect.
Yeah.
And this one's a little bit tricky because as humans, we're kind of hardwired. We're pre-built to focus on the negative more so than the positive. And that's purely from a survival standpoint. Back in the day when we were surviving off the land, we had to recognize if something was a potential threat to our survival, either to avoid that or to actively seek it out and get rid of the problem to fix it. So we tend to have a bit of a bias to focusing on that stuff purely from that evolutionary, focusing on the survival side of things.
Humans are natural problem solvers. And so that's why we tend to focus on those negative aspects. It doesn't mean that there's more negativity in the world. It just means that we're more drawn to focusing on the negativity, right? It's like the news. The news promotes a lot of negative things. And so people who watch a lot of the news tend to think that there's a whole lot of terrible things going on in the world. And while, yes, that may be true, there's also a lot of positive and amazing things happening in the world.
That's right.
And again, it's about looking at both sides and being able to notice both sides of the equation.
Yeah. The other thing to note as well in that is it's not that you're doomed to only focus on the negative. Your brain's really smart in that you can train it to do things. So you can actually train it to turn things around and to focus on the positive instead of that default setting of focusing on the negative.
Yeah. And I'm a great example of that because my whole life was really focusing on negative. I had a massive negative bias. And so it's really only in recent years where I've been able to actually catch myself and notice that, okay, I'm really focusing on the negative. Now I'm starting to put steps into place so that now I notice positive things and I feel better about life and I feel happier in general because I'm now able to focus on the positive things rather than the negative things.
Yeah. And when it comes to like losing weight, an example of that is just focusing on those reasons why you think it's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
This won't work for me because of this, this, and this. Again, we're hypothesizing that it's just not going to work. We haven't tried it. We're already just focusing on those negative things that we think are going to stop us.
Again, that was definitely me. I would constantly remind myself of all the reasons why it wouldn't work or why it couldn't work for me. And I'd constantly be finding all the things I've done wrong. And I'd start focusing on all the things I did wrong, all the mistakes that I made. And it was just like this downward spiral because when you're in that state of focusing on all the negatives or the mistakes or the reasons why it's not going to work, you're going to continue to act in ways that prove that to be true. So you're really digging your own hole there.
Yeah.
And you're going to keep going further down into that hole unless you start to get aware that, okay, just because I'm thinking these things and I'm focusing on negative things doesn't mean that that's all there is. I'm just missing the other side of the story.
That's right. And that's that whole thing. And like you may have heard our previous podcast where we talk about how our thoughts influence our feelings, emotions, and actions as a result of that. It's very much the same way in reverse. If we start to focus on things that are more positive, we often find that we start doing things that are in alignment with that and we experience more of the results that come from that.
Exactly.
So as I always said, like not everything is negative. It's only what we're focusing on that we see and we are believing. If we start to believe that things will work, if we start to believe that, hey, I've been really consistent this week, I've hit 6 out of 7 days of following through on the plan I set myself, and I'm doing all these things consistently, then we're going to start to feel better, and we're going to start to repeat those patterns again and again and again, and we're likely to get the results that we actually want.
Exactly. So with the negative bias, the way that you start to work through that, again, the first step is awareness. The first step is noticing and being aware of the fact that as a human, this is normal, that you're focusing on negative things, but it is just a focus. It's not the truth. It's not the facts. It's just your thoughts.
Yeah.
And so you can then start to reprogram your thoughts to become more positive. And a few ways that we do that personally and with our clients is writing gratitude, daily gratitude, writing down things that we like about ourselves or things that we're doing well. And the biggest one is celebrating the small wins. So often in weight loss, we think that we can't celebrate our wins unless it's like we lost 5 kilos or we followed the plan perfectly. And we won't let ourselves celebrate all of those really small things we're doing for ourselves each day that are really big. They're bigger than you think they are.
That's right.
And when you celebrate those small wins, the funny thing is you start to do more because you start to feel better about what you're doing. You become less likely to quit. You become more likely to then take more action to then get the results that you want. So it's really a win-win.
Well, there's a saying, I think I said it in one of the other podcasts before, which really sums this up perfectly. And, we fall into the trap of getting impatient, but acceleration comes through appreciation of what you're already doing well. The more you can get used to appreciating the small things, just really, really minute things. Like, I woke up at the time I said I was going to get up. Like those tiny little things, if we start to appreciate that more and more and more, we find that we do those things more and more and more because our focus is on them. And as a result of that, then we start making faster progress because we're doing things more consistently. And so the next one, the third one, is extrapolation. So this is believing that things will always be the way that they are right now.
Another one that I have spent a lot of time in, that feeling of like, well, I feel bad now. I can't see this going away.
Yeah.
Or I'm having a really bad day. I can't see myself having a good day again.
Yeah.
It gets quite dramatic.
it's really sort of putting almost like your mind in a bit of a cage and going, well, it's like this way it's at the moment. It's crappy right now.
Yeah.
It's always going to be crappy forever. And it's painting like a pretty bleak picture.
Exactly.
Instead of realizing that, hey, this is just a momentary thing.
Yeah. And another way that this shows up, particularly in weight loss, is when we make a mistake or when we do something that we didn't necessarily want to do or we don't follow the plan perfectly, we then make that mean something about ourselves and we make that mean something about what's possible for us in the future. We think because I've messed this up right now, that means that I'm probably never going to get it and it's all gone to shit.
Yeah. And then the likely action of that, it's so funny, like we come back to that example, the likely action of that thought pattern is to then just go off the rails.
Or to like quit, throw your hands in the air and say, this is too hard. This isn't for me. Weight loss is too hard for me.
Yeah.
It's not possible for me.
And it's not having the foresight to realize that it's just a momentary thing. Like as soon as I get back on track and as soon as I just start doing the things that, I've been doing consistently, things will turn around. Exactly. It's just taking that moment and running with it.
Yeah. And at the moment, and whatever's happening in that moment is actually never as bad as what we create in our minds about it.
Yeah.
The actual thing, the feeling, is never as bad as what we think about the feeling.
Yeah.
The action that we took, the mistake we made is never as bad as what we make that mean about our possible future and lack of success in the future.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting.
Well, it sort of comes back to what we were saying in the very start of this podcast, where two people can have a very different way of seeing things.
Yeah.
And if an event happened, how you perceive it to happen could be vastly different from someone else, how they perceived it to be happening. They might see it through their set of their lens and go, well, it wasn't actually that bad. All I did was went off plan a little bit, you ate a little bit more food. And that actually happens quite a lot on the coaching calls.
Yeah.
That's why we get you to tell us about it, because it's quite often you're making it out to be this huge, big deal in your own mind, and it's not actually as bad as what you think it is.
Yeah. Our brains love to create drama.
Yeah.
Our brains thrive off drama.
Yeah.
And that's why we talk so much about the difference between facts and thoughts, because there's very few facts in the world and we have a lot of thoughts about them. So like the fact in that situation might be I ate XYZ food. But in our heads, the thoughts we're having about it is, oh my God, I'm such a pig. I've ruined everything. I ate everything. I binged. And now I'm never going to lose weight. The scale's going to be up this week. I knew this would happen. I knew I wouldn't be able to stick to the plan.
Yeah.
See the difference there? One is very emotionally charged and the other is quite neutral.
Yeah.
I just ate this food.
That's right.
If we can get our brains to recognize and focus on, okay, what's the fact and what are my thoughts, we can then start to turn the temperature down a little bit, bring ourselves back to what is actually true here. It's maybe not as dramatic as what my brain is telling me right now. Now let's move forward and take some positive action to move forward.
That's right. But see, as a little side note, if if this has really resonated with you, you're seeing how these all tie together in that, if we're extrapolating a situation that's happened, it's often we're extrapolating it in a negative way, focusing on that negative bias again. So they're sort of like meshing together.
And then what happens after that?
Storm.
Then what happens after that is we then continue to find evidence to confirm our bias.
We get the confirmation bias kicking in, and we've just gone, well, this is just a mess. But no, hopefully, as we've been explaining these, you're able to see that, hey, these things are probably playing out in my own life. And the beauty of talking about this stuff and understanding it is now that you can start to see it happening. So you can start to pull yourself up and you can go like, if I'm thinking a really strong thought right now or strongly about something, is that correct? Is there another way I could be thinking about this that could give me a different result?
What else could be true? That question.
Yeah.
I always come back to that.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if we're fighting for those limitations, we're going to keep them. We can fight for it all we want. We're going to keep hold of it. But if we actually want a different result, sometimes that takes letting go of those limitations and understanding that we may not be correct all the time. The way we've been thinking might be different to what's needed to get to the result that we want.
Yeah. So when it comes to working through those times when we are extrapolating our thoughts and feeling like everything's going to continue, one thought that is helpful in these moments is this too shall pass. It's really important to remind yourself that nothing is forever. There's something called the duality of life, which means that in order for us to experience good, we have to experience bad. In order for us to know light, we have to also know darkness. And this idea is really helpful for when you're going through those hard times, the really difficult moments, to remind yourself that this is part of life. It's part of being human to experience both sides. It's not realistic to always be doing well or to always be feeling good.
Yeah.
You need both. And so reminding yourself when you're feeling shitty, feelings are not forever. This is just momentary discomfort. I can handle this. I'm safe. It's going to pass. Reminding yourself it's normal to have bad days.
That's
Not
right.
every day is perfect. It's very normal and it's very human to have times where you just don't feel good and things just aren't going your way.
That's right. Well, it's very much like the seasons, right?
Yes.
You're never going to have a summer all year.
Exactly.
You're never going to have a winter all year. Maybe in Melbourne you might, but...
So reminding yourself that tomorrow is a new day.
Yeah.
You always get to wake up the next day and make new choices for yourself. Or even in the next moment, you can make a new decision for yourself. And then also reminding yourself that mistakes and failure are always part of the process. There is no such thing as a person who has achieved success of any kind, or who has lost weight and kept it off, who has not made mistakes or had moments of failure or had bad days or felt like crap at some point.
Yeah.
Everyone has to go through it because, again, it's that idea of duality. If you have not experienced the shit, you're not going to appreciate
When it's good.
the success, the goodness that comes out of getting the results you want.
That's right.
You won't appreciate it if you haven't worked hard to get there.
And the only thing that's different between someone who has the results that you want to get or someone that's deemed successful is they made the decision in that moment to get up and just try again.
Exactly.
and to keep going. They didn't let it sway them, and they didn't stop. They just kept trying again and again and again.
And that's the difference. It's just reminding yourself of all of the things we've just spoken about and being able to maintain that perspective and awareness rather than sitting in the shit and dwelling.
Yeah.
And then probably quitting. Because when you quit, you're pretty much taking results off the table.
Yeah.
There's not even a possibility that you can get results when you quit. And so always just maintaining that perspective in order to keep yourself moving forward is the key.
So there's actually plenty more of cognitive biases. When we were researching this, there is hundreds of them, and it's crazy. And it's really, really interesting though. We're going to be talking about more of these in future episodes. So if this is something that you're really interested in, stay tuned for those episodes as well. We hope that you got some value out of today, and that you've maybe recognized one of these three might be coming up with yourself, or even all three.
If you're anything like me, all three.
But really ask yourself and get curious and go like, where is this showing up and how could I possibly change this? So as we went through with something like the confirmation bias, look for ways that you can prove yourself wrong. Like actively try and prove yourself wrong, or prove another viewpoint which might be completely different to what you believe right now. So just get curious with it and start to explore a lot of that.
And with the negative bias, constantly allowing yourself to focus on the positive things that are happening. Reminding yourself that the negative side is not the whole story. What are the things you have to be grateful for in your life? What are the small wins that you can celebrate every single day to keep yourself feeling optimistic and moving forward?
And then obviously with extrapolate, well, as we went through, like, you don't want to be doing that. Realize that it is probably just a momentary thing. It's not the end of the world.
This too shall pass.
That's right. It's going to pass eventually, and you'll be thinking about it in a completely different light. So guys, we hope that you got some great value out of today's podcast. We will be doing more on these cognitive biases in future episodes. We want to say thanks so much for listening, guys, and we'll both see you in the next episode.